scared? You should be. Military fails have huge consequences, which is exactly why they're so hilarious. Oof. So from being terrified of a rogue goose to accidentally invading the wrong country, buckle up, because we're about to unpack some of the funniest military fails of all time. What do soldiers do when they're not fighting for their country? Turns out, this. Unfortunately for this guy, he didn't notice his sergeant standing right by him. Oh no, there it is. Can we freeze frame that beautiful moment of realization? Someone's getting 50 push-ups. Undoubtedly, being in the military is one of the toughest jobs going. But while doing a routine clean on her vehicle, this soldier was forced to really understand the meaning of high-pressure roll. This wasn't some lapse in judgment. If we go back to just here, yep, that's her friend cranking the pressure up on the hose. Why wouldn't they do it? Starship poopers. When it comes to military might, Ghana is generally not known for it. So when the Ghanaian army marched out in snazzy futuristic exosuits at an exhibition back in 2019, everyone was shocked. Only they weren't snazzy, nor futuristic, nor exosuits. They're a total sham. As well as the mobility being hilariously sluggish, they look like they've been bolted together with scrap metal. And the vehicles being shown off weren't any better. Which is no surprise when they've been made from 1/8 of an inch thin tin plating. Seriously, check out this footage I found showing how rudimentary the construction was. Wow. Yeah, these things aren't gonna protect the people inside from a pocket knife, let alone a bullet. Ghana's annual military budget is around the $0.3 billion mark, which may sound like quite a lot, but compare that with the US's astronomical $842 billion, and suddenly the wonky super armor makes much more sense. Still, they didn't have to make such a song and dance of how embarrassingly bad it is. They should have known I'd be watching. To make sure you're always watching too, hit those like and subscribe buttons and land yourself a massive win. I upload new amazing content almost every day. Now, back to the fails. The indestructible vase. Special Forces. They're supposed to be the world's elite. From the SAS to the Navy SEALs, the world expects the best from, well, the best. But sometimes, even the best fall flat. And falling flat is exactly what the Iranian Special Forces did when trying to show off their incredible vase-breaking skills during a military parade back in 2021. The parade was supposed to show their fierce fighting style. Despite their best efforts to break the vase though, well, they just kept failing. And failing. And hey, look at this guy's spinning punch. Oh wait, that failed too. And to make this all the more humiliating, the show was held in front of none other than the former Commander-in-Chief of the Islamic Republic of Iran Army, Ayatollah Salahi. Yeesh, I wouldn't want to be on the receiving end of this guy's wrath. But then again, maybe he was able to see the funny side. Right? Paratrooper blooper. It's a miracle that nobody was seriously hurt back in 2022 when Nigerian paratroopers did a training exercise over their capital city, Abuja. Oof! Sending men soaring from unimaginable heights into a densely populated urban area. Who could have guessed that wouldn't be a good idea? The men landed on cars and trees and some even on the harsh concrete. I can't help thinking those battered holy parachutes didn't do much to aid the situation. But there is one thing they got right. Can you guess what it is? It was actually the parachutes.
Believe it or not, they had holes in them for a reason. See, older chutes were designed with holes to increase their fall speed and ability to glide. Without the hole, the parachutes were prone to more erratic, uncontrollable movement. With it, excess wind is expelled easier and doesn't cause the chute to twist and flip. So despite looking shoddy, they're actually not. Of course, that didn't seem to help these guys very much. Oh dear.
The Nigerians aren't the only ones with parachuting woes, though. In a clip from the Flintlock 2019 military exercise over Sahel, Africa, this unit didn't exactly cover themselves in glory. That little scream as he finally falls. Oh boy, and things don't get much better. Oof. Unsurprisingly, nobody's owned up to who this actually is, but they know. They know. Rambo no. Military should be tough, unrelenting, and intimidating, right? Okay, so is that what you think when you watch this? Ooh, not a bunch of men dramatically equipping pointless balaclavas and beating up trees. Believe it or not, this hilarious video was created by the North Korean government and released in 2023 as a show of military might. Because nothing says "don't mess with me" like breaking out of a clearly fake chain and headbutting a block of ice. Thank God he had that thin, soft balaclava on. And in another highly stylized piece of propaganda, a soldier, wait for it, leaps over a car. Wild. In fact, the whole thing plays out like some kind of cheesy Rambo montage. Are you quaking in your tidy whities yet? Be right back, I gotta go change mine.
The Great Emu War. War never changes. Or does it? I mean, usually wars are fought against humans, right? Not birds. Well, boy, I've got some news for you. Because back in 1932, the Australian government called on the military to go to war against a 20,000-strong army of emus. Yeah, you heard that right. See, although emus were a protected species in Australia in the 1920s, the giant bird's unruly behavior, like destroying farmers' crops, led them to be reclassified by the 30s. Not only were they wrecking important sources of food, they were also leaving gaps in fences where rabbits could enter and cause further problems. Farmers were seething. So in response to the mounting threat, the Aussie government did the only logical thing. They armed the Royal Australian Artillery with World War I era machine guns and ordered them to cull the flightless birds. Yikes. Only the emus turned out to be much greater foes than expected. They were such a formidable enemy that one newspaper compared their resilience to the invulnerability of tanks and their fighting spirit to that of Zulu warriors. What? Yep, while they're not able to fly, emus can run up to 31 miles an hour, and their feathers and strong skin give them near immunity to gunfire. No, really. It can take up to 10 bullets to finish the job. Jeez. On top of this, they employed guerrilla tactics to evade the soldiers hunting them. The birds worked in packs with a leader guiding their continued crop destruction whilst also warning the pack of any approaching soldiers. This organization, coupled with their speed and resilience, led to the vast majority of the birds surviving the attacks made on them, forcing the army to embarrassingly withdraw. Following this, the emus only continued to ravage crops though, and the soldiers were called to return just a few days later. This time they managed to have more success, with the emus suffering just under 1,000 fatalities and 2,500 injuries. Despite this though, the population continued to thrive, and it wasn't long before the entire military operation had to be called off. In other words, the Royal Australian Artillery had been bested by a bunch of birds. Damn, that's humiliating for them, but pretty amusing for me. Tank trouble. A defining feature of any good military is its tanks. Hulking and formidable, they can change the tide of battle in an instant. That being said, not all tanks are made equal. Take American tanks. Despite being widely considered top of the range, this one got stuck in a ditch and wrecked its tracks back in 2016. And if you think that's bad, you've seen nothing yet. Now more than ever, attention is being drawn to good old Russian engineering. Yep, Russian tanks are really struggling right now. During a full-scale attack in the Sumy Oblast region of Ukraine in February 2022, a bunch of them got seriously stuck in the mud. The attack was a complete failure, and the uploader of the footage claimed the tank's operators fled. Want to know what makes it worse, though? The same thing happened just a week earlier to tanks training in Russia's Rostov Oblast region. A digger can be seen desperately trying to help them out of their predicament, but whether or not the tanks themselves were saved, there was no saving face. And to add insult to injury, that same year, tanks and other vehicles captured by Ukrainian forces were displayed in the streets of Kyiv in a kind of mock parade. That's a lot of busted tanks. While this is undoubtedly high-level trolling from Ukraine, it's a dire shame it's in the face of such difficult circumstances. Nobody wants war, least of all the people on both sides that have to actually fight it. So I've got something a little more lighthearted for you next. The goose is loose. An army of emus is bad enough, but losing to a single goose? Come on. People eat geese. The soldiers at Fort Sill, Oklahoma, though, didn't seem to get the memo.
Oh, yes. Oh, my God.
He's so mad.
Yeah, I kept trying to tell him, don't stop, just keep walking.
They really covered themselves in glory there. The goose, fondly named Steve, is actually known to the soldiers at the base, as is his partner Brenda, and the pair can get very territorial. According to the video's uploader, this is far from a one-off. Steve terrorizes the soldiers on the daily, and they get freaked out every single time. Ah yes, trained members of the most advanced military in the world, unprepared to deal with a disgruntled goose they see every day. It makes losing to emus look a little less embarrassing for the Australians. On the bright side, some of the soldiers saw the funny side.
Oh, yes.
Colonel Heartthrob. What would you do for love? If your name was David Franklin Slater, betray my whole country would be your answer. The retired Army colonel was working as a civilian for United States Strategic Command when he met who he thought was a Ukrainian woman through a foreign dating site. The two only ever spoke online, but 63-year-old David was smitten. So smitten that when she started asking classified questions, David was all too happy to answer. Seriously, the chat log is something else. She literally calls him her secret informant. Of course, the supposed Ukrainian hottie only wanted top-secret U.S. government information to reassure her that help was coming. But her questions wouldn't stop. From the dates U.S. officials were set to go to Kyiv to specifics about classified weapon supplies, David told her everything. Except, it almost certainly wasn't a her or a Ukrainian. If I'm looking to chirps a cute girl, my go-to isn't spilling national secrets. But clearly Big Dave here thought this was a great tactic and ignored the huge red flag screaming, "I'm a middle-aged Russian spy pretending to be a hot Ukrainian woman." When it all inevitably came to light, David was arrested in March 2024 on charges of illegally disclosing national defense information and conspiracy. If found guilty, he could face up to 10 years in prison and a fine of over $250,000. Cripes, David. Just another lesson in thinking with your brain and not your... I'm not the best cook, but if you're unfortunate enough to be enlisted in the Russian military, you'll be subjected to food even worse than my attempts, as one unimpressed soldier amusingly showed.
Выше. Положи ее и постучи, Дима.
I think that's supposed to be mashed potato, but it looks more like paper mache and super glue.
Постучи по ней.
Постучи рядом.
Insults to the chef.
Isolation and miscommunication. Thanks to modern technology, militaries can easily communicate in real time today. But 100 years ago? Well, people had to wait for a message to be delivered by hand, which sometimes led to some truly bizarre occurrences, like when the US invaded Guam and Guam smiled about it. Yeah, you heard me right. In June of 1898, the US and Spain were at war. As part of their offensive, the US sought to invade the Spanish-controlled island of Guam, so they sent their warship, the USS Charleston, to do so. When the Charleston neared the island, it fired 13 shots, but the Guamanians didn't respond, at least not at first. Then a Spanish vessel approached from the island and a couple of soldiers on it signaled that they wanted to board the Charleston, and board they did, but to the Americans' astonishment, they greeted them with smiles. Then they politely asked to borrow some gunpowder so Guam's forces could return the salute. Return the salute? Wait, suddenly the penny dropped. Guam had thought the 13 shots were just a salute because they hadn't even known they were at war. It turns out the Spanish government hadn't informed the remote island. Because of this, they were utterly unprepared to fight the Americans with barely 100 men fit for battle and no strong fortifications. Seeing no other choice, Guam swiftly surrendered in what went down as one of the most peaceful invasions in history. And all because of lack of smartphones. Ha!
Drills, that is synchronized movements practiced as a group, are a standard part of any military force and a show of discipline. If a soldier breaks formation, there can be big consequences. But what if something unexpected happens mid-drill? I mean, he did a good job of keeping a straight face, but you just know that guy's friends tore him to shreds the second that drill was over.
Intimidation, humiliation. Everybody has to deal with neighbors from hell at some point in their lives. But for Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro, he had more to worry about than a messy dog. He was worried about a US-led invasion. In response to the perceived threat, back in 2019, the Maduro-led government decided to intimidate the Americans. How? By releasing a video of their army engaging in so-called intense training activities. The results were, well, take a look.
¡Soldado en acción!
Okay. Yep, the intense training was little more than running around and screaming like madmen. Though at one point they did show off their ability to run over a log too, while screaming of course. Incredible. It really makes you think, if this is their attempt at a show of force, how would they perform if it actually came to getting down and dirty? Let's hope we never find out. Photoshop fails. You know me, I'm all about spreading the truth, and that's why I don't think I'd ever get along with North Korea's leader Kim Jong-un. Known for both his fire haircut and exerting tight control over the secretive state's information and media, Kim has never stopped short of going that extra mile to try to bolster his nation's image. Unfortunately for North Korea, it often ends in utter failure. Like that time back in 2013 when they tried to make their military fleet look bigger by copying and pasting it. Except whoever did the shoddy job made it pretty obvious. Oh dear. Not that it's the only instance. Notice anything strange about this photo? From left to right, it shows an American soldier, a North Korean soldier, and a South Korean soldier, meeting at the demilitarized zone between North and South Korea. As a show of strength, all three countries tend to send their most intimidating-looking soldiers for these meetings. Except wait, the average height of a North Korean man is 5'7", the same as a South Korean, and 2 inches shorter than an American. So how come the North Korean is towering over them both? Well, he's not. Not in real life anyway. The image has been doctored again. This is the actual photo. That's embarrassing, to say the least. Yep, no matter what the North Korean media might put out, they can't control our media, which is how images like this end up getting out in the open. Well, hey, it could have been worse. At least that underwear looks clean. Don't be a plank. It's better to try and fail than to not try at all, but sometimes trying and failing can definitely make you a laughingstock, like during the siege of Marawi. In 2017, after a years-long political struggle between the Philippine government and local extremist insurgents, heated clashes broke out in and around Marawi. So in response to the violence, the Philippine military decided to armor their vehicles with wooden planks. No, I'm not joking. Now, being fair, a few slats of good thick wood might help against smaller, more conventional weapons, but the Philippine military was fighting against insurgents armed with RPG-2s, and that's a different kettle of fish entirely. The RPG-2 fires a rocket-propelled grenade that can penetrate a jaw-dropping 7 inches of steel. In other words, it could go through that wooden armor like a knife through butter. Needless to say, the wood wasn't a very successful endeavor. But Philippines government aren't the only ones to have tried this. In March 2022, desperate Russian forces in Ukraine were strapping logs to their vehicles in the hope it'd give them a better chance of surviving ambushes. Sure, it could help a little bit, but wouldn't it also make them more vulnerable to fire? All I know is I wouldn't feel particularly safe rolling around in a truck that looks like it's straight out of a terrible Mad Max ripoff. Silly soldiers. Not all military fails are wrapped up in doom and gloom, though. Some could even be considered wins. That is, if you're not the commander in charge. I mean, check out these guys playing a game of mortar baseball. See, usually you'd pop an explosive mortar into this thing and use it as a weapon, but not these guys. They decided to get creative and use it to fire baseballs instead. To be honest, I suspect this would have been more likely to destroy the baseball, but at least they were having fun. Because in their spare time, soldiers do have fun. You ever broken or misused something at work because of, shenanigans? Well, they have too. As fearsome as this tricycle-powered cart gun looks, I have a feeling their commanding officer didn't approve of it. And then you have these boys. I sincerely hope he knew there was a shovel in there. At least it's not as dangerous as pointing a fully functioning launcher the wrong way, which I assure you some soldiers definitely have. But if I showed you that footage, I'd be demonetized. The point is, servicemen and women are people too, so they joke around and they fail sometimes. Not to mention some pretty ironic faux pas. Oh dear. I somehow doubt that United Nations peacekeeper realized he was standing in such a terrible position. But even so, it's thanks to the countless hours of hard work they put in that we get to sleep well at night, even if they don't. It certainly seems like one soldier attending this military parade didn't anyway. It's important to remember that whatever side of the coin a soldier is on, they're still a human being with family and friends just like you and me. Yeah, I definitely have friends. Moving on. Looking fly. I don't take enough photos, something I'm trying to get better at. But there is a right time and a very wrong time. Back in 2010, 2 American pilots took a couple of MH-60R helicopters out to Lake Tahoe for a training exercise. Initially, everything seemed to be going as planned, but suddenly observers down below saw both choppers fly down to the point they were barely above the surface of the lake. Then, after a brief moment, they both seemed to lose control completely and smack into the water. Somehow they didn't go under, and the pilots were able to bring the crafts back up into the air. But it was obvious something had gone badly wrong. So what the heck happened? An engine hiccup? A simple mistake? Nope. Unbelievably, both pilots had defied protocol and flown down low by the lake before taking their hands off the chopper's controls to take photos of each other for their squad's Facebook page. I wish I was joking. Unsurprisingly, they lost control of the vehicles while taking the snaps and, well, despite narrowly avoiding disaster and escaping with their lives, they caused over $500,000 worth of damage when they hit the water. Because of this, they were severely reprimanded and promptly stripped of their flying statuses. And a Navy pilot that can't fly? Yeah, that sounds pretty career-ending to me. Waves of discontent. No matter which country you live in, you're gonna disagree with at least some of your leaders' decisions. But if you lived in ancient Rome between AD 37 and AD 41, there's a good chance you disagree with most of them. That's because Emperor Caligula ruled in those years and he made some pretty erratic choices. Like, declaring war on Neptune, god of the sea. What? Yeah, one day back in 40 AD, Caligula gathered his army, ballista and all, on the shores of northern France. Then he commanded them to attack the ocean. So they did, slashing swords, launching boulders, and throwing spears into the waves. This went on for who knows how long until after finally declaring victory over the god, Caligula forced his soldiers to collect seashells in their helmets as so-called trophies. Okay, sure, that's a pretty big fail in terms of actually winning a military victory, But why the heck did it happen? Well, we're not entirely sure. Was it just an act of raving madness by the eccentric emperor? Maybe, but some people think otherwise. See, we know Caligula had massed his forces on the shores of northern France in the hopes of crossing to Britain and securing a military victory there. We also know that said attack never happened. Roman legionnaires had also mutinied in the past against his more experienced father. So piecing this all together, what if Caligula's army had refused to sail to Britain with the relatively inexperienced Caligula, and in response he'd punished them by making them fight a non-existent force? It's definitely an imaginative way to humiliate an entire army, but we don't know how many of the stories surrounding Caligula are even true. He probably wasn't very nice, this we're fairly confident on. However, some scholars believe his cruelty and eccentricity might have been embellished significantly by later Roman thinkers looking to discredit him. What do you think? Let me know in the comments below. Nothing but hot air. If you're unconvinced that emus, Roman gods, or geese are enemies formidable enough for human beings, then what about the night sky? Yeah, the sky. One eventful night in 1942, only 3 months after the USA's entry into World War II, air sirens suddenly began blasting over Los Angeles. Several hours of heavy anti-aircraft artillery followed, with civilians forced to hunker down inside their homes, terrified. The only thing was, nobody actually saw an enemy aircraft, and only a few hours later the whole thing was declared a false alarm. Yep, an investigation later pinned the entire event down to some stray weather balloons coupled with war nerves and inexperienced soldiers. So, LA wasted thousands of US munitions firing at what essentially turned out to be a load of old nothing. However, the incident also launched a host of allegations crying cover-up. Indeed, many believe LA was actually visited by UFOs that night. No hard evidence has ever been presented to substantiate this, but you've got to admit the whole thing is kinda sus. What do you think? Do you buy the weather balloon story, or could there be something more to it? Let me know down in those comments. Crossing the line. The Brits. We love them, but old habits die hard, and sometimes they just end up invading somewhere, like back in 2002. And here's the kicker. It was an accident. 24 Royal Marines were out on a training exercise near Gibraltar, part of the UK's overseas territories. One part of that exercise was storming a beach. Only extremely bad weather had made seeing and navigating very difficult. And bordering Gibraltar on its north side is Spain. Can you see where this is going? In the confusion caused by the stormy weather, the Marines accidentally crossed into Spanish waters, and one boat even landed on a Spanish beach. The Marines disembarked and were preparing to start training when it became apparent something was very wrong. There was a resort full of people in front of them. Not only had they got off at the wrong place, they'd done so in front of a load of confused vacationers. After being informed of their mistake and told that, unlike the Spanish resort, Gibraltar has a huge 1,400-foot rock landmark, they made a hasty, embarrassed retreat. Crikey! Luckily for them, Spanish officials accepted their profuse apologies for the unannounced invasion, and UK-Spanish relations continued as normal. Unluckily for them, I'm not ever gonna let them live it down. GP espionage. Usually, if a state wants to uncover the locations of an enemy state's military bases, they'll have to employ their intelligence services for some good old-fashioned espionage. But back in 2017, any old Tom, Dick, or Harry could pick up their smartphone and pinpoint the exact location of several top-secret US military outposts. How? One word. Strava. See, the popular fitness app allows its users to track their running routes and record their times, which can then be uploaded to the app's servers and shared with others. Well, Strava decided it'd be a fun idea to create a visualization using everybody's GPS data to chart the most popular routes. So they created and published a heat map using over 3 trillion GPS points all around the world. Pretty cool, right? Only in doing so, they completely compromised US national security. Think about it. It's not just civilians using Strava. Military personnel use it too. And soldiers stationed at their bases aren't going to run very far from them. In fact, they'll probably run around them. Over time, all these soldiers going on regular runs around the perimeter of their bases added up to create one undeniable image on the Strava GPS map. Something that was most obvious in places like Afghanistan and Syria, where Strava users were almost exclusively foreign military personnel, meaning bases stood out like a sore thumb. In one instance, you could even see the interior. To be clear, these are secret buildings that don't appear on services like Google Maps, yet there they were in plain sight. Safe to say the US government was not happy. In response, they banned all active military personnel from using tracking functions on their phones unless specifically authorized. But let's be honest here, the damage was already done. Imagine going for a morning jog and accidentally giving away some of your nation's best kept secrets. That's it. I'm quitting my exercise plan and grabbing some donuts. Jeez, all these military fails have made me a little terrified. But before I go, can you think of any major fails I missed? Let me know down below and they might be featured in a future video. Thanks for watching.